Today, I'm joined by a very special guest, Debra Fox Gansenberg. She is a psychotherapist who will be sharing her expertise on parenting, relationships, and the art of being okay with imperfection. Debra is the founder and president of New Beginnings Counseling Service. She's also an author and was the co-host of the radio show Life Unfiltered.
Welcome to Imperfect Love with Dr. Carla Marie Manley, psychologist, author, and relationship expert. I'm here to help unravel mysteries and misconceptions about love, relationships, and mental health issues, plus everything in between. Love is complicated, people are not perfect, and relationships surely can be tough. Together, we'll navigate this messy, imperfect space of real life.
Today, I'm joined by a very special guest, Debra Fox Gansenberg. She's a psychotherapist who will be sharing her expertise on parenting, relationships, and the art of being okay with imperfection. Debra is the founder and president of New Beginnings Counseling Service. She is an author and she was the co-host of the radio show Life Unfiltered. Welcome to the podcast, Debra. It's such a joy to share time with you.
Thank you for having me. I've really been looking forward to our time together, and I love your topic of your entire show, podcast, and today's visit as well. Looking forward to our conversation.
Thank you. And I'm so excited to share your expertise with our listeners. And you have written a book on parenting. Could you just give us the title and a little bit about what that book is about?
It's how to raise imperfect kids and be okay with it. And I think it's the idea similar to the title of your podcast, that imperfection is really reality. And that if we're striving for perfection, we're heading for a really, really big disappointment. Because when I sit with all of my clients and students, we talk about the idea that there is really nothing that we would consider perfect in life. And if that was, I'd really love to hear about it because I'm not sure it's really out there.
Absolutely. I'm with you on that. And I also think perfection is the lens, a really
Hmm.
important lens to have on. I often think of nature when we go out in nature, we go, oh, it's a perfect day. We're
Yes.
not picking the trees apart or, telling the birds their feathers should be perfect or anything like that. We're
Right.
just saying, we're looking at it through the lens of
Nice.
joy.
That's
So,
right. And
yes,
no, I wish more people would use that lens, when we say what a perfect day, that we could really use that lens and do the U-turn and look at ourselves and embrace who we are, what we are, and consider that our own type of perfection, our own personal perfection.
absolutely. Or maybe ditch the word perfect.
Perfect. That's right.
Right.
That's
I
right.
just
All together.
realized, hey, I'm imperfect. I'm working on me. This is a good thing.
That's right. That's
S-
right.
So before we launch into the actual podcast, could you tell us a little bit about what makes you you?
Well, I knew this question was coming after listening to all of your wonderful episodes, and I thought about it, and I think what makes me me is the word connectivity. I'm all about connection. I feel as though whether it's connecting with friends, family, children, clients, personally or professionally, I'm always looking for connection and the U turn with myself, making always striving to stay connected with what's going on within myself, and striving to always make sure that I am staying connected to what's important to me. I've been called a transmuter, which is somebody who also brings in the negative energy and able kind of comes through my system, and I output positivity. And I love to hear that as a descriptor for myself, because I do believe I try and often I'm not here to put a smile on everyone's face, but I do love humor. But I believe that when a client or a student or a dear friend of mine or one of my own kids, my husband, comes to me, that I am somebody they connect with and that I'm able to kind of bring in what's going on with them, and that the output is kind of draped in more of a positive lens or a positive feeling or positive attitude, what have you, because that it's important to me. And I think the other thing that makes me me is I always signed a card, love and laughter, because those are two things that I really, if I could tattoo something on my forehead, it would be love and laughter, because those two things are probably two of the most important things to me as I travel through life.
Wow, thank you. A few things
Well,
about what you just said.
yes.
I really love the idea of being a transmuter. And
Hmm.
that takes me to, the idea of alchemy, right? Where we
Hmm.
transmute in alchemy, we
Yes.
turn the lead of life into gold.
Hmm.
And that takes intention. We're not talking,
That's right.
alchemy, they're not talking literally taking lead,
Hmm.
although some people think it's, there's a science of it, somehow taking this
Right.
lead and turning it into gold. But when we look at it in the emotional world, in the world of love, we can
Hmm.
take things that are leaden, that are heavy, and turn them into something that is much more
Absolutely.
pure and joyful and golden in energy. So, congratulations
Yes.
on being a transmuter. I think that that's a really important part about being in the healing profession is being
That's
able
right.
to help people on that journey from transmuting their challenges, maybe not into
Hmm.
joys, but
Right.
into something
Absolutely.
that they're able to navigate and move through with courage and resilience.
That's right.
And the
That's
other
right.
thing that you were saying about if you could tattoo something on your forehead, that it would be love and laughter. It's so interesting because, as you likely know in the research, we hear that in loving relationships, humor is
It
such an
has to be.
important element. And it's not humor at other people's expense. So if somebody's listening saying,
No.
"Oh, that gives me permission to be sarcastic with my partner or my kiddo." No, we're not. No, we're not
Oh,
talking about being sarcastic. We're talking
right.
about humor that makes people feel connected, have laughter arise organically. Is that where you come from?
Oh, absolutely. I always say, I'm not laughing at you, I'm laughing with you. And I think it's so important to feel as though humor is used in a healthy way. And through the years, I've learned I can go up over the hill a bit, and maybe my humor can get me in trouble at times. But as I've grown older, I've realized that humor is just one of those things that really lighten life, and it's such an important ingredient to be happy. And so I love humor and laughter. And I had a lovely little a young child in my office the other day, and they've recently lost their father. And the young girl says to me, I want my mommy when she gets upset to say, instead of a word that gets her upset, I want her to say peanut butter and blueberries. And I said, why is that? And she said, because I just want us all to laugh. And my heart
Mm.
just was like, what a beautiful example of bringing humor into something. And this is a young child. And I thought, what a beautiful thing to want your parent to feel and to exude. And so she wants her to use these funny words to bring forth laughter and humor. And it was just a perfect example of kind of what I've been trying to make sure I instill both personally and professionally.
And I love that. Peanut butter and blueberries instead of, throwing out something
Oh, yeah.
negative, throw out, peanut butter and
Oh,
blueberries.
yes. And we've all thrown out the negative. I own it too. We're not perfect. And so she was trying to assist her mom in coming up with a way to be frustrated, but bring humor into it so that the frustration would evolve into laughter.
I like that. And it also is a way of looking at the idea of being imperfect. That
Right.
when we are in relationship with anyone, in this case,
Hmm.
the mom's talking and the kiddo's talking, right? That we
Hmm.
see that if a child is saying, in some way, it sounds like this child is saying, "Ow, this hurts me. Mama, could
Hmm.
you do this instead?" So the air in the room
Exactly.
feels better, so the energy feels better. And
Exactly.
sometimes we want to tell someone who's asking us to shift a behavior. We want to say, "No, let me be me,
Oh.
let me do it my way." And we want to be able to be sarcastic or critical or negative. And I think it's so important to be able to tune into how maybe our feelings, not that we want to put our feelings underground, but we
Hmm.
also, I would think, want to really make sure that the people that we are in the same room with, this, sharing energy with. So we want
Mhm.
to be careful about how those words and that energy lands on
Oh, that is so you touched on so many things,
them.
little, nuggets there when I work with couples, married or uncoupling, or parents who are co-parenting or intact families. It's so, so important to understand that how our messages leave our mouth and how they are received and how we intend them to be received, when they land on somebody else. Quite often, they aren't quite the way that we intended them to be, and, so people might come out sideways, it might land on them as a hurt or a disappointment, and it is so important then, as we've been, slowly speaking about, is the space to make sure that we can loop around and heal and discuss what it is that isn't going well in that discussion.
You hit on one of my favorite topics, and this does take us back to our listeners' question,
Mhm.
healing ruptures. Because
Right.
ruptures in relationships are
Mhm.
going to happen. Ruptures between a
Absolutely.
parent child, partner partner, friend friend, whatever it is at work. That I think it's the healing of the ruptures because we are imperfect. We
Yes,
will we will get it wrong sometimes, no matter
that is
how long
right.
we've been on the planet, no matter how many alphabet, letters are behind our
Mhm.
name, right? We all make mistakes. And
That's
so
right.
tell our listeners a little bit about ruptures and repair.
Yes. And this is something that is almost spoken in my office daily. And I think that to begin with, I always look at 3 stages in every relationship. Oftentimes we come together because we enjoy each other, right? That connection, whether it's a friend or a colleague, it's our child, it's our spouse. We come together, we enjoy something, or we communicate for a purpose in a good way. But then the next part to that is that we will have a miscommunication, a misunderstanding, a rupture, a disagreement, a difference of opinion. And when that happens, it's not if. And I love that you spoke in such, concrete. It will happen. It's not if it happens, but it will happen. That doesn't mean you're in an unhealthy relationship. It means that the next step is healing that rupture, and that is the key to a healthy experience, and a healthy relationship. And so I think what's so important is how we repair. And when I work with couples, the repair is truly the hardest type of work. But if you don't do the repair, then you live in the rupture. And when you live in the rupture, the hurts add up. And I call it, adding pancakes to or flapjacks to your stack. They only pile up and pile up. And then we end up in a whole different situation with lots of hurts and ruptures. And you live in a ruptured state. It's not pleasant and it's not easy. And so it's so important to learn how to heal. I call it the loop around. My clients know it as the loop around. And the loop around is when somebody in the relationship is sitting with the discomfort, whether it's a conversation that went awry or for them, the conversation went awry. Maybe the other person isn't aware of this, but the loop around is an opportunity where if you feel like you've misstepped, I call it a misstep. I don't call it a mistake often because I feel like it was meant to happen. Whether it's in that moment to learn something or heal something or understand something about your partner or the person you're speaking with or yourself, it's a misstep. And when the misstep happens, whether it's you've spoken to your child in a way that you're disappointed in yourself with, or you've gotten really upset with your partner, or you had a bad conversation, a conversation go poorly at work, that a loop around is an opportunity to be the one who's pursuing the conversation, extending the olive branch, and engaging a conversation where you're teaching the other person about yourself. And so I use that lens because it then decreases the opportunity for somebody to have the knee jerk reaction of defending themselves. So I use the lens of teaching somebody about yourself. And in a
Okay.
Okay.
Sorry for I just like to pause because this
Yes.
is such a rich piece. So
Mhm.
we can imagine that this listener the mom who screamed at the 3-year-old kiddo. Let's give our listeners an example of how so now she's there's a rupture. Kiddo's looking at mama saying, crying, oh my God. And mom is saying, okay, I've made a misstep
Right.
here. I want to actually use this as a growth opportunity, a healing opportunity.
Mhm.
How would you suggest she do this with a 3-year-old kiddo?
Absolutely. A great question. I would encourage, and I use the word coaching. I coach my parents all the time to loop around and teach the child about yourself and say, remember when we just had a little argument over the fact that you wanted something at Target and I said you couldn't? There was a part of me that really, really wanted to say yes, but the part of me that knew we were going to have dinner in a little bit, I really didn't want you to have the candy. And so that part of me was looking out for you. And you got really upset with the answer no. And so when you didn't, and you kept asking and asking, and I kept saying no, the part of me that got frustrated was the part of me that got really loud and said something that I really didn't like. So I want to say I'm sorry that I got loud or upset because I didn't like that and I didn't want to do that, or I didn't like myself when I did that. And so when a 3-year-old, is trying to understand, I speak in terms of the part of me. Instead of saying mommy was, mad at you, it's more of the part of me that felt upset was the part that raised their voice. And it really helps a child understand that it begins to teach them that not all of them has made mummy upset, but just a part of them. And so that part of mummy was the one that misspoke. And so I really want to just share with you that I'm sorry that my part of me that was really upset got really loud.
This is so perfect because when we talk in parts, some people might think that you and I are talking about dissociation. That
I'm
we have
talking about IFS, but yes, I use
internal
yeah,
family
your family
systems.
systems. Yes,
Yes.
yes.
And so when we're talking so listeners, IFS is internal family system, and it's a really
Mm,
wonderful psychological
framework.
theory
Yeah.
and framework, yes. And so when we're talking about internal family systems, so I don't speak for you, this lovely
Mhm.
way to look at it. Could you give our listeners just a little snippet of what you mean when we're talking internal family systems and
Right.
how we have all of these parts inside of us?
Right.
And it's
Right.
normal. It's normal.
Right.
It's healthy.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Although when you practice it, sometimes you feel like you're a little, unsure of what's going on. But there was a movie. I forget the name of the movie. It had all the different colors and different feeling words, and they all kind of had a color and a word and an expression.
Inside out.
Yes, that was it.
I love
Inside
Inside
Out.
Out.
Right.
Yes.
So Inside Out is it was actually played at the IFS annual conference, and it's such a great example of what IFS is. And essentially it's the fact that we all have hundreds of parts of us, right? We have a happy part, a sad part, frustrated, disappointed, angry, joyful, athletic, intellectual. We have all these parts. And what's so important is when we are going about our day, we actually behave from these parts of us. So when we're happy, we might smile and look joyful. When we're sad, the part of us that's sad might cry or be tearful. The part of us that's frustrated might be have a scowl on our face, or we might kind of be mumbling under our breath. And so, what's so important is to understand that it's just a part of us and that we are able to hopefully learn how to navigate these parts of us by practicing and learning and understanding that we actually have the ability to navigate these things about ourselves. And so when you're teaching a young child, it's beautiful because sometimes children think, oh, I've done something wrong, I'm bad. No, it's just a part of you that did something. And so let's see if we can find the part of you that feels remorseful or you know, apologetic. And let's bring that part over and see if we can get that part to say, I'm really sorry, or, ooh, whoops, I did a misstep or a no no. So it really helps kids learn and parents to understand that it's not all bad. It's just a part of you.
Absolutely. I love internal family systems theory. I think it's
Mm,
wonderful. And when we look at it, because what it does, listeners, is it takes us away from this I'm all good or I'm all bad, this
that's right.
dichotomy, or my
Hmm.
partner is all good or all bad, my parents all good or all
Right.
my bad, my kiddos are all good or all bad. What does it do? It creates room
Hmm.
for imperfection,
That's
because
right.
that's the problem with one of the biggest problems with a perfectionistic attitude is it creates this I'm either
Hmm.
perfect, all good, or I'm imperfect, all bad. And I can
Hmm.
imagine, so let's lean into our listener's question again.
Hmm.
She's feeling as though she can't get anything right, that the harder she tries, that she's not able to be this perfect wife, this perfect mom. I
Hmm.
don't know about, the individual's work life, but I would imagine that's a thread through their life, like,
Absolutely.
I need to be perfect, and having been there in life, it is
Hmm.
so much pressure and so much
It is.
stress. So
It is.
what would you say about that element? That
Well,
striving so hard to be perfect and never
well,
getting it right.
if this person was sitting in my office, we would explore what actually for them, what that word means to them and what the belief system is attached to what perfect is and why it's so important to them. And if we're using IFS, right, and it's just a part of them, we would work really hard to understand this, but then also to see if we could decide that this part could step back so that they could really lean in and understand and appreciate and bring forward the imperfect part of them and be okay with it and really embrace the fact that maybe the imperfect part is the part that they need closer to them while the part of them that really feels necessary to be perfect to step back a bit. But, in terms of coaching a mom who really feels this way, it's really I often self-disclose, and, I might share a story of my own and, they, "Oh, you misstep?" "Yep, I have disagreements with my kids, my partners, my friends, my family," and it really helps them understand that it's quite healthy, and I don't even like the word normal, but typical to have these things happen. And, so I think a mom in that situation then feels like, "Wow, okay, maybe this isn't something I need to strive for because it isn't reachable."
And I'm a fan, as it sounds you are, of being able to make mistakes and not
Mhm.
seeing them as failures, but as
No,
growth opportunities. Growth
absolutely.
opportunities, if you let's take it back again to the listener and she's making a mistake with her
Mhm,
kiddo or, snips at her husband. It is
mhm.
that opportunity to say, whoa, whoa, wait a second, deep breath in, deep breath
Mhm.
out. And then
Yes.
collect yourself and do something, as you're saying, draw that part of yourself that knows how to be calm.
Mhm.
There's a part of
Absolutely.
you that knows how to be calm,
That's
and
right.
maybe draw that part forward in that case. Yeah.
Absolutely. And I do think, through all of these things, one of my mentors taught me that in actuality, when we have these ruptures, you actually want to have a level of appreciation that they've occurred because now there are opportunities for you to do a U-turn on your own self to understand, okay, why is this bothering me? What is this about? Instead of pointing the finger and saying, oh, you got me so upset, I punched a hole in the wall. Instead, it's do the U turn and understand, okay, why did you get so upset? What was so upsetting about this experience? And that's when I have parents that are seeking perfection. Why is it that they're seeking the perfection and understanding that in order to change the expectation they have of themselves.
And I love that question, that pausing of saying to the self, why? Getting
Mhm.
curious with yourself.
That's right.
And one of my favorite questions, I'm curious what you think about this because I'm such a fear specialist.
Mhm.
I'm grounded in that piece as well. But looking and saying, what am I afraid of? If I'm not
Mhm.
perfect, what's my fear?
That's right.
If I
That's right.
show up and my hair's a mess or I'm a little grumpy and I don't have smile on my face 24/7, what am I afraid of? What am I afraid of if I show up as my genuine self and if I make a mistake?
Mhm.
What am I afraid of as far as apologizing and making it right? What do you think about that kind of framework of beginning to ask yourself, what are you afraid
Abs
of?
Absolutely. Absolutely. It's so connected to my how when I am working with someone, I always ask, like, what if you weren't perfect? What does that mean to you? What's the meaning underneath it? What does the word perfect mean? What's the belief system attached to this word? And what comes up for you when you think, oh my goodness, if I show up without the makeup, or a kid still in his pajamas, or a child who is not in good space right now, but yet we still have to go and do this. And so the child might misbehave or misstep in that situation. Okay, what is it about yourself that are you a fear of judgment? Are you a fear of disappointing somebody? Usually these things are kind of what I call in the undercarriage of the need to feel perfect. I use a great example with my clients where, one of my children, and it will date me, but when Target first came forward out in the East Coast, I had a couple of toddlers at the time, and one of my children wanted the little, goldfish. And very long story short, I said, no, you need to put them back. And he was my tantrumer. And I said, I'm sorry. And so I put them back and he got all red in the face and he starts getting really upset. And I said, okay, well, I'm going to set my watch and you have 1 minute to, have your tantrum. And then we've got to go because we got to get home and have dinner. And there was a woman standing to my right and my son was kind of looking at me and I go, okay, go ahead, have your tantrum. And I'm looking at my watch and he stopped immediately, kind of looked at me like, what? And, as I was walking away, the woman said to me, "Weren't you afraid that he was gonna have a really big tantrum?" And I said, "And if he did?" And there's the imperfection to somebody else, right?
Mhm.
Looking on. The imperfection is that my child was going to have a tantrum, and oh my goodness, wasn't I worried about that? But frankly, no, I wasn't, because I'm not worried about the judgment. I'm not worried about what other people are thinking in that moment in time. And I think that often is very attached to perfection, worrying about what the outside is thinking looking in.
Wow, thank you so much for pausing here because it's such a simple question on the outside, right? If we say,
Mhm.
what if you weren't perfect? And if we each ask ourselves that question,
That's right.
what if you weren't the perfect wife? What if you weren't the perfect mother, the perfect child, the perfect employee, the perfect boss? What would happen? And I agree with you. I think when we drill it down and get really to the
Mhm.
foundation of it, it's a handful of things. It's a
Oh,
handful of things.
absolutely.
I won't be respected. I won't be loved. I won't be safe. I won't be
Mhm.
seen. I won't be found worthy. I will be judged. It's in that handful of things.
Absolutely. Or I won't seek approval. I won't get the approval. Um,
Yes.
I call oftentimes the need for perfection what I call a legacy burden, which is something that is generationally handed to us, right? If your mom or your grandmother were always put together perfectly, every hair was in place and perfect outfit and never saw them sweat, in some ways, oftentimes those burdens are handed down generationally. And all of a sudden, we might not want to behave in the same way. So we get to change that legacy and maybe not be so perfect and not have our hair done exactly, the way our grandmother or our mother was, and be okay with that. But it takes a lot of work to reach a stage in a place to feel okay with not carrying on that legacy when it doesn't serve you anymore.
And I think in the age of social media, where there
Mm,
is this legacy that's coming through social media channels. We are not talking intergenerational legacies. We're talking a
that's
legacy of
right.
people we don't know handing
Mm,
us, very carefully curated images and airbrush. And we're looking at ourselves and saying, oh, I can never be that. And so we now have a different
Mhm.
sort of legacy, which is this
Right.
24/7 viewing. I mean, we can go there and
Mhm.
compare our lovely, wonderful, imperfect selves with something that appears to be
That's
perfect.
right.
And that is a
It
legacy
is.
that we need to keep on our
Oh,
radar as well for our listeners, for the one who wrote in,
it's
realizing, wait, who are you comparing yourself to? I'm not sure I know any mom who hasn't, not that
that's
we want to ever be abusive to anybody, but I'm not
that's
sure
right.
I know any mom who hasn't lost her temper
Oh,
at some time or done
mhm,
something where you later go, oh my God, how did I do that? Like, how did I forget
mhm.
that or how, whatever. And so, but if we're comparing ourselves to these very isolated images of
It's
somebody
awful.
else's life,
Mhm.
hand-picked images that show the perfect dinner or the perfect family outing or the, a husband with the roses, we're forgetting that that person too has a very imperfect life.
I try and help all my clients remember, images are a snippet in a second, in a moment. And everyone who tries to present that their life is like that, and we make the not just the observation, but the judgment that they're perfect. If you sat down with all of these people behind these images, everybody has something. And
Mhm.
I try and teach parents this. I've worked in education for a very long time and working with children who have learning challenges, and every child has something along the way. And if someone is trying to teach you otherwise, I don't know how authentic or real that story is. And, it's giving people permission to say, okay, yeah, I had a less than perfect day today, or hour, or moment. And it's okay. And give yourself I always say to moms, especially moms, and working dads, like, give yourself a little grace. Don't be so hard on yourself.
I echo you. I use that same phrase with clients. Give yourself grace because there's really no upside to being
Mhm.
blaming or critical. There's an
That's right.
upside to giving yourself grace, pausing and saying, if I could redo that, not what you did wrong, not going
Mhm.
in replaying what you did wrong, but going just for a moment saying, if I could redo that, how would I do it differently?
Mhm.
How
That's
would I
right.
breathe into that moment in a slightly better way and
That's right.
replay that in your mind? And
That's
that,
right.
because when we replay what we wish we could do, that's what we're hardwiring into the brain rather than the fact that we made a mistake. We made a
That's right.
misstep. And
A
then
misstep.
we get to do a
Absolutely.
different dance the next time, slightly
That's
different.
right. I do. I tell my clients, a few of them, as they come into my office, take the boxing gloves off, leave them outside, so that they can take a pause from really being hard on themselves and beating themselves up. And some people need that gentle reminder.
I think we can all use a little more gentleness in our lives
Oh,
internally and
absolutely.
externally. And I think that's where the power of grace comes in. Grace isn't
Mhm.
an excuse. It
Mm-mm.
is just this gentleness that you say, I'm imperfect. I'm evolving. I want to do better, but right now I'm just
That's
human.
right.
I'm just a
That's right.
human. Yeah.
I
Oh,
agree
Deborah,
with
I
you
could
on that.
talk with you for
I
ages
know.
about this
Me
topic.
too.
So I can't wait to connect again. Are there any
Absolutely.
final words you might have for our listeners about this topic of
Mhm.
being imperfect and being okay with it? And then I'd love to have you
Mm,
tell our listeners where they can find you.
sure. I think imperfection is underrated. And I think it is a word that I wish we saw more and more of. And I'm thrilled that we're discussing it, because it really is reality. And I really think that in our world today, that's really what needs to be portrayed out there. That's what needs to be on social media. And for those listening who really do have the imperfect moments, don't be so embarrassed to share them, talk about them, and wear them as a badge of honor, not as something that they should be embarrassed or feel badly about. And the more we talk about it and the more we discuss it, maybe it wouldn't have such a negative connotation. So I welcome the conversation always in my office, and I hope listeners really do. take a pause and take a breath and learn really why it is that they need to feel perfect and see if they can get that part to step back.
And I do have to say before you tell our listeners where they can
Mhm.
find you, that is a perfect follow-up for our listeners' question because kudos to individuals, as you're saying. You have to be reach out, share that blip you had. And by this individual reaching out and saying, I yelled at my kiddo, all of a sudden, if that person is listening, she is hearing and going, oh, I'm not alone. You mean there are other
Mm,
people out there who have yelled at their kids and felt like, oh my God, I just can't get this right? Of course there are.
that's
Welcome
right.
to the club. Welcome to
That's
the
right.
club of imperfect people.
Maybe we need to start a club, Carla. It's
Yes,
gonna be the Imperfect People Club.
the
But I
imperfect people
do
club.
and we wear a badge of honor because that's really a sign of authenticity and being, honest and truthful instead of trying to present it as that snapshot in the social media that we all know, we see. And we might even put up ourselves because it was a joyful moment in time, but it doesn't mean that it's a representation of all the time.
Absolutely. There's
Mhm,
just the more we talk about it, the more we talk about the gifts of being
mhm.
authentic, of being
That's right.
yourself, and being proud of that. It's just beautiful.
Mhm.
So, where can our listeners find you, Deborah?
Well, I'm not a huge fan of social media, and when I wrote my first book with my co-author, they enjoyed the social media run. But I do have a wonderful website. The name of my company is www.newbeginningscounselingservice.com, and that website is about myself and the book and how you can reach me. I also have an Instagram account that you can find me, and it used to be a lot about the radio show and the book, and I hope that it will. I'll kind of refeed it, but it's Fox Gansey, is Foxganzy, and so those are the two places that really, if you're looking for me, you can find what's going on in my world. And I'm also located at a local university as a professor right now, teaching at the master's level. And so a lot of people are finding me over there as well, which is wonderful. I'm enjoying that as well.
And that university is
Salem State University in
Salem
Salem,
State University.
Massachusetts.
There
Yes.
you go. Well,
Mhm.
thank you, Deborah, for gracing us with your presence. It has been a
Oh, my
joy and a
pleasure.
privilege. And thank you, listeners, for sharing your time with us today. And this is Imperfect Love.
Thanks so much for sharing your time with me today. Remember, you have the power to transform your life and love fearlessly, if imperfectly, and it's my privilege to help you along the way. You can find more life-changing content, including my books and other podcast episodes, at drcarlamanley.com. Feel free to submit your own confidential questions through my website. I'll do my very best to include your issue on a future episode. If you found this podcast helpful, please subscribe and leave a review. Until we connect again, this is Dr. Carla Marie Manley wishing you oceans of blessings and love. Please note, this podcast is psychoeducational in nature and is not intended to replace formal mental health support. Please contact your healthcare provider or emergency hotline if you need psychiatric care. And as always, please take good care of your amazing, wonderful self.